right? And so I want to talk to you from Psalms 91. All of you probably have this memorized. If you don't, work on memorizing that by the end of the year. If you just write down a verse or whatever. But I want to minister to you just for a little bit. We're not going to get to all of it. I got 5 or 6 points, but maybe we'll get to one. But I'm going to give you some things. I don't want you to write them down, and I want you to actually go back and pray them. But, Psalms 91, he that dwelleth in the secret place. So I'm going to give you a point to write down. And the first point is the secret place is your success place. The secret place is your success place, or place of success. He that dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. And as business leaders, your true victories are not first won in the boardroom or conference rooms, but in the secret room. That's really where it's won. The Lord woke me up last night, and I got up like 4:30, and I was like, it's Him. Anybody ever had the Lord wake you up and it's like, okay, really? And He's like, yeah, I can't wait any longer. It's like, okay, so you're just like, I'm with you. And sometimes you're worshiping, reading the Word. Sometimes you're just there. And you learn to value that, more than food. And it's not the conference room, it's the secret place where you kneel before the Lord. And the secret place is not just prayer, it's really a sacred furnace that burns off fear. It's the place that forges wisdom. It's the place that washes you, makes you honest, right? Honesty is heaven's soap. It's the penicillin for our soul and our conscience. I find when I get into His presence, it literally burns up the fear in my life. And then He rewards you with divine sleep. Don't you want to sleep? Not have to self-medicate and scroll till you pass out and the phone hits you in the face? When you step out from the secret place, or when you step into His presence, you don't step alone. When you come out from the secret place, you carry the fragrance of heaven. You carry His presence with you. You carry the fragrance of the Lord on your skin. You can tell when people have been with Jesus. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about. You can tell when people have been with the Lord, and your children can tell. Your spouse can tell. Joanne can tell when I've not been with Jesus. If I don't spend a day or two with Jesus, she can tell. After a week, my family can tell. After a few weeks, the whole church can tell. Right? We think we're good actors. If Hollywood ever needs some actors, I know a place where they can get some well-trained, experienced actors, because so many times we become professional at pretending. But God will not anoint our mask. He's only going to anoint who we really are. And our children can see it. Our children can smell the presence of God in our life. They'll see it in your eyes, in your facial expressions, the way you walk in the door from work. The countenance of your face. How many of you know God looks at the countenance of your face? Didn't He see the countenance of Cain's face? When God didn't accept his offering, made him murder. The very first murder in the Bible was caused by ministry envy. God using someone else and doesn't feel like they're using me. God doing something for someone else doesn't look like they're doing it for me. Jealous of another brother made you murder with our mouth, or hate in our heart, or be jealous. Our kids can see it on our face, and they may not be able to tell it in terms of the deals, but they'll know it in the atmosphere that you carry. The laughter, right? Laughter is how you tell your children everything's going to be okay. And if you dwell in the secret place, your home will feel like a sanctuary. How if you want your home to feel like a sanctuary? Yeah, protect it. I remember when we went through things in the Twin Cities. You can turn me down a little bit, Sam. When we went through things in the Twin Cities, and everybody was wanting me to like talk about social justice and talk about social causes and talk about all this kind of stuff, and they said, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. We'll talk about politics, and you need to talk about this and talk. I said, I'm not doing it. I said, this is a sanctuary. I said, you know what you're asking? You're asking, it's like there's a big storm outside, and we run outside and we tell everybody, come in the church, come in the church, come in the church. And then they come in the church and ain't no roof. And they go, why you tell me come in here? Ain't no different in here than out there. The purpose of a sanctuary is to create like a diaconate, as it were, or a habitation, someplace that is safe from the storms of life. Like you look at an animal sanctuary or a reserve, they don't build skyscrapers there, and it's protected. And I said, when you ask a pastor to bring the world into the church, you ask us to violate the very principles for which we believe. Your home has to be a sanctuary. Be careful what you bring into it. Be careful what you let come in through iPads and televisions, and be careful what you bring that's still on you from work. Pray on the way home. Don't just listen to podcasts about how to be more successful. Spend that time with Jesus, so that when you walk in your home, your children can smell the fragrance of heaven on you. If you dwell in the secret place, your home will feel like a sanctuary, even when your world feels like a battlefield. Don't believe the lie that the presence of God cost you success. The presence of God will not cause you to forfeit success. His shadow is all the strategy we need. His shadow is the covering that keeps us from burning out. And building your business, build your business, but build your altar first. What was the first thing Noah did when he came out the boat? He built an altar. Because he realized if it wasn't for God, I wouldn't have no home to build. He didn't build a home, he built an altar. Noah didn't come out the ark and build a business, he built an altar. Because if it's not for the Lord, I don't have a business to build. I don't have a home to build. Build an altar, and that's where he will whisper into your heart the future of your family and your business. How many of you want God to whisper? Lord, just whisper to me what do you want me to do with my kids. Whisper to me what do you want for my business. Take away all of my fears, all of my insecurities. How long have I gone? That might be out of time. Was that 10 minutes? Let's do like 5 more minutes. No, we got to get the goat up here. Psalms 91:2, verse 2, it says, I will say, Lord, he is my refuge and my fortress, my God, in him will I trust. Write this down. Number 2, God becomes your refuge in a ruthless world. The marketplace is ruthless. It rewards talent, but it can devour your soul. In a world of competition and a competitor, God's your fortress. His presence is your fortress. He's a refuge in the storm. He is the walls that surround your house when arrows fly. Anybody ever had arrows fly? You're right. And when your children ask, Dad, Mom, are we safe? You can answer with authority, yes, because we're hidden in Christ. God's our safety. God is our protection. God is the one that covers our family. And this refuge is not a retreat from business, but the secret to carry his presence into our home. In every negotiation, every dinner table conversation, we need the Lord present. And I want to say too, it's not just the business deals we make, or, I've told my wife, I said, it's not just the sermons. Heaven doesn't just record sermons preached and baptisms recorded. I was telling Dr. Rutland, he was familiar with the Church of God denomination that I grew up in, and as a ministry, they'd give you a report to fill out every month, and you had to fill out how many people were baptized, how many people were saved, how many people were justified and sanctified. I don't know if they're sanctified, Dr. Rutland. But I don't know. How am I supposed to know that? I don't know. But I think sometimes in ministry and even in business, you might think, well, I didn't make that deal or that contract. And heaven doesn't just record those things. Heaven also records bedtime prayers and sacred hallway conversations and meals shared in love and prayers at night. All these things are important to eternity. And keep eternity in the heart of your family. Talk about eternity all the time. Think about it. Bring it up. What are we doing this week that matters in eternity? And here's the last thing I'll share. Write this down. Number 3. The presence of God protects more than profits. Psalms 31:3, surely he shall deliver you from the snare of the fowler. I think sometimes in business we get trained to guard profits, but God's presence guards more. It guards the atmosphere in our home, not just money. And the snare of the fowler is not only financial traps, it is the subtle snare of busyness and distractions and things that steal the affection of our heart. I know what it's like with my kids. They just have a lot of questions. Sometimes my wife's like, you have another parent. And they're right over there. I've answered all the questions I can answer today. Please submit everything in writing. Wait 2 to 3 weeks for a response. Any parents just get the questions or just like, what? What are you saying? And then I'm like, I have to be like a private investigator because so much of what they're saying is not real, or it's like a half-truth, or it's a misunderstanding. And so you got to go in there and actually figure out what was said, when, who said that? Well, how did you think that? How would you know to think that if you didn't hear that? Anybody else have to do it? It's like I'm Sherlock Holmes now, half the day, trying to solve these mystery discrepancies. God, I need your presence. But the presence of God guards the atmosphere in your home, and it deals with pride. Pride can rob children of their parents' eyes and ears. because so many of us are trying to prove something to somebody who didn't believe in us. And now our children have blind and mute parents. Don't let pride rob your family of your eyes. Real ministry begins when your eyes meet your child's. And God delivers you so you can deliver them. He rescues you from being swallowed by the endless chase. Anybody know about the endless chase? So your children will not grow up fatherless because you're present. And even when our kids are living in our house, we can be absent. I'm telling you from my own experience, I've had to repent of being absent in the room with my whole family. His presence protects your marriage from the disease of bitterness. And His presence protects your heart from the infection of neglect. I don't ever want my wife to feel neglected. A prophet can buy vacations, but he can't heal a child's loneliness. Like I have a daughter right now. One of my daughters lost some friends, and she feels a little lonely. What am I going to do? What's the deal with that? How do I solve that? How do I minister to that? Money can purchase schools, but it can't teach my son how to pray. He's got to hear his father pray. And the presence of God who wants to live in your home, let's end with this, so that you can hand your family something greater than wealth. You can hand them wholeness. Or if you want to hand your family wholeness, like the greatest gift you can give your family is a healthy you and like giving all of myself to you. And being there and being present. Try to find ways this week to celebrate all of your family. Serve all of your family. Teach your family to serve each other. And then make sure everyone in your family knows what they bring to your home. Right? Didn't you have that for your business? Don't you have an org chart? It's like this person brings this person brings this. My wife and I say all the time, Nicholas brings, what, babe? Joy. He's saved in my phone as that. So tell all your kids constantly, you bring this to us. Without you, we don't have this. They all add value. Amen? You guys are going to win at home. Amen? Let me pray for you. Lord, I thank you for our homes, our marriages, our families, our children. May we carry the aroma of your presence. May our children sense it. May our homes be filled with laughter, and may joy be what we eat at our tables. And may our family wear the garments of unity. In Jesus' name. Yeah? All right. Give Trey a big God bless you as he comes.
Yeah. All right. I prefer that. I'm excited to have Dr. Mark Rutland here. One of the things you'll find is there are a lot of wise people, a lot of great coaches out there. But then there are people that God's assigned to speak into your life in different seasons, and some for long seasons. And in my life, Dr. Rutland's been one of those people. He came in at Oral Roberts University at a time where the university was about to shut down. And between him and the Green family, who've donated now hundreds of millions to Oral Roberts University, they turned that whole ship around. And I had said this morning, and I said it on the boat yesterday, but we've got about 20 people in here that I have not shared this with, is there are seasons in your life where you'll hear a great speaker, and then when it's done, later you'll go, I didn't realize who was in the room. And this morning we have one of those people. Dr. Mark Rutland is one of the greatest, if not the greatest communicator I've ever heard. And he's very humble. I think he's too qualified to be as humble as he is, but we'll let him continue that. But he could walk into any church in America and preach, and everybody would love him. And I can tell you that as a gift. And Dr. Mark Rutland, he pastored two of the largest churches in America at one point, the 7th largest Assemblies of God church in America. He stepped into Southeastern University. He took a small Christian school, and he made it a significant school. I think he said that when you stepped in, they had nothing. When you left, they had 60-some million of real estate, which is significant. And then he came into Oral Roberts University at, I think, 61 years old, a story that could have easily ended bad and turned the whole thing around. And I can tell you, we're talking about gifts and rewards in heaven, and there will be some unbelievable gifts in heaven for Dr. Mark Rutland for saving one of the few Holy Spirit-empowered universities in our country, because there will be tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of people that are better off because of what he's done. And so I'm so excited to have Dr. Mark Rutland with us. I want to encourage you that you might have had a great week. You might have had a week with a lot of tension. You might have had a week that maybe made you want to quit. And I want to encourage you to be present this morning, because I know that we don't just have somebody that's gifted, but we have somebody that hears from the Lord. So please help me welcome our friend, Dr. Mark Rutland. Thank you, Senator. Thank you.
I'm going to set that down if you don't mind. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Please be seated. Thank you. There's nothing ruder than coming into somebody's house and rearranging the furniture. But I just want a little more of an open battlefield. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. It's a joy to be here. I want to tell you something that was good and loud, that Trey probably doesn't even know, but we had an event at Oral Roberts University, and somebody had to escort my wife. So I was on the platform. So they had chosen a student, and it was Trey, and he, supplied his arm, everything like that. And when we got on together, she said, I don't know who that boy is, but he's going to amount to something. We're still hoping. I've not given up on that. I don't know if you even knew that. Yeah.
No, I actually want to say one thing, because it's a cool God moment. One of the things I want to encourage you is to ask God for more. I think a lot of times we think that God's limited and God is unlimited. And so this is a part you don't know. So when you came in, one of the things I've always loved is I love leadership, but I said, Lord, make a way for me to have a relationship with Dr. Mark Rutland. Oh. We'd never shook hands. We'd never met. And right before ordination, I got a call from the Dean of Men, Matt Olson, and he said, hey, Trey, he said, the VPs, Dr. Dan Guajardo, asked me to find somebody to walk with Dr. Mark Rutland's wife to do security for her and his parents. And we were talking about who would be a great fit. And he said, everybody else has said no. No, I'm just kidding. And he said, so we've been thinking, he said, would you be there for them this whole weekend? So what's so cool is I asked the Lord, make a way for me to have a relationship with you. And that's how he delivered. So ask God for more.
And he did. It's just been ever since. So I guess the point of that little story is watch for little moments in your life that connect you up in some way with someone that can be a benefit, or into whose life you can speak with some authority. I'm so glad that the pastor gave that beautiful teaching on Psalm 91. I don't know if that's going to be your next book or not, but I think you've got some real insights into that. So it was wonderful, and I'm glad because what I'm going to teach has almost nothing to do with Christianity at all. So I have taken very seriously this part, that this is a CEO roundtable, and so what I'm going to share really is a business and leadership issue. That doesn't, it doesn't mean that I can't do the other. I do, but I just felt strongly directed toward this. So I want to talk to you about 21st century flex leadership on the chaos control continuum. There is, it'll be a mistake as we start this if you assign ethical or moral implications to the two terms chaos and control. So mark that off, if you will. They are not moral terms, they're diagnostic terms. So chaos is not bad and it's not good. Control is not bad and it's not good. They are different points on a perspective, on a continuum. So chaos is where the creativity is, the energy, the vitality, the movement, the motion is where chaos is. On the control side, that's where the negativity of chaos is limited. So in chaos, let's go this way. Control. What is ultimate nuclear control in the human body? When the nuclear material in the human body stops and stands completely still. What's a simple word for that? Yeah, death. Okay. On the other hand, what is ultimate nuclear chaos? That's an atomic bomb. So atomic energy can light up a city. It can also blow up a city. Ultimate control, all the train wrecks happen in chaos. There's no train wrecks in control. Why? No trains. Everything is, the ultimate end of control is, in order to limit the negativity of chaos, you simply stop everything. So on this side is there is a spiritual implication here in this sense. On this side, the ultimate control mechanism is law and fear. On this side, the ultimate chaos is that there's no rules, no control. It just breaks through the membrane into the absolute negativity of chaos. So the issue is for the chief executive officer that you are on a continuum. What I'd like for you to, if I could introduce a concept into your mind, think of yourself on a wooden platform that goes this way, and you have roller skates on, but the wheels are turned sideways. So you can't skate this way. You're skating this way, sideways. And that you're careening between chaos and control. So the challenge is that everybody in your organization has a natural tendency toward one of these or the other. It's you have the chaos people. That's in any organization. That's the creative people. That's your designers. That's all that. In a church, that's the music pastor and the worship leader and the youth pastor. And on the control side, you have the CFO, the church administrator, all that kind of. It's the reason that all the youth pastors in America think the church administrator is the Antichrist. Is because they're operating on completely different worldviews. And the challenge for the chief executive officer, whether it's in a church or a business, is that you're in the You're in the driver's seat like Ben-Hur. You've got all these thoroughbred horses, and they all want to run, but they all want to run in their own direction all the time. They only want the chaos. People in your organization only want chaos. They perceive control as the enemy. And they perceive of the people that are comfortable in control as enemies. The control people see the chaos people as the problem. So what is management all about? Management is about limiting variableness, predictability, if you own a company that manufactures hardware, how many 10-penny nails did we make last year? How many did we sell? How many can we make this year? How do we keep our profit margin exactly the same? That's the control people. Your chaos people, that's your creative engineers, and he's designed a new kind of screw that he just knows is going to sell 100,000 units. And so he introduces this new little hardware, this little screw, and he says, look at this thing. That seems so exciting to him. The CFO perceives that. His knee-jerk reaction is that that's bad. He doesn't see the possibility of it. He sees the disruption of it. And so you're on this sideways thing constantly moving. So it's like if I could give you another visual of it, it's like a great big video game. So the goblins are coming at you this way, okay? And so you skate to dodge the goblins. So what young people think, how old are you, son? Yeah. How old? 22. Perfect. So when you're a full-grown human, what you're going to think is, if I can ever just get this all figured out and get to be like this old dude, it'll be fine. The problem is, it's like all video games. Isn't this true? The better you get at it, the faster the goblins come. And that's the way it is with executive leadership. Just when you think you've got it all figured out, the problem is your company grows. You add 10 more chaos people, and suddenly the goblins are just coming like this. And so you hire a control person to control the goblins. And now the control people and the chaos people are all mad at each other. Now the problem is this. There are times when you need chaos. You need it. There are times when you need control. And here's the challenge. Nobody in your organization will be able to discern that quite like you. Nobody gets paid. Your youth pastor doesn't get paid to understand the organization. He only gets paid. You don't want a 65-year-old CFO to run your youth group. That's called death to a youth group. What you want chaos. You want energy. You want people that can do lock-ins and crazy stuff. By the same token, you don't want a CFO with a sense of humor. So you surround yourself with staff people that have a natural tendency. And so when you are steering the organization in the direction that they like, you're going to be hail fellow well met. But the other people are not going to like it. So what does it mean? Somebody in your organization is going to be mad at you all the time. Isn't that exciting? Now, when you begin to tighten down the valves, when you begin to tighten up, the chaos people won't like it because the shoe pinches, but they won't accuse you of anything. They simply don't like it. And the tighter you get the valves, you may lose some of them. Some of them won't be able to stay when you go through a tightening down phase. But when you begin to loosen the valves, when you say you can get it so tight that nothing can move, you can tighten all the valves. There's no train wrecks, but none of the trains are moving. So when you begin to loosen the valves, the real problem will be here. Because what they're going to say is you're compromising. So the chaos people do not see tightening the valves as compromise. They don't apply any moral reality to this. It's these people, because they say if the ultimate control mechanism is the law, then the further in this direction you go, the more legalistic it gets. So the legalistic mentality, I've heard it said all my life, if you're an inch away from the wall, you may as well be a mile away from the wall. Well, actually, see, that's like not true. But it is something that people say. So they see anything you do to loosen the valves, they see it as compromise, and there may actually be accusations that will be made in this realm. So what are those things? So first of all, some of it is, this is the hard part. Some of it is intuitive. And I can't really teach intuitive leadership, and you don't need my permission, but you need to find permission to lead intuitively. There are times when you have to be able to say, and you say it with humility, and you say it with authenticity, I may be making the worst mistake of our whole time together. This may be a disaster, but I feel I have to do that. We have to go in this direction. And then if it's a mistake, you have to be the one, you have to come back and say, look, pastor is a donkey. Hee-haw, hee-haw. And that's what you have to be willing to eat the crow. But there will come times, you don't want to do it all the time, but there may come times where you have to lead intuitively. Anybody here ever, this is such a young group, anybody here ever heard of an old classic movie called The African Queen? Anybody ever heard of it? Well, 3 or 4. So The African Queen was neither an African nor a queen. It was a boat. And it's a movie with Katharine Hepburn and Humphrey Bogart. It's a great, great movie. If you've never seen it, then open your cultural valves a little bit and find it and watch it. It really is a brilliant movie. It's wonderful. And it's about Katharine Hepburn plays this kind of prudish old single lady missionary, Spencer missionary in Africa at the time of World War I. Humphrey Bogart is a profane boat captain. His boat is the African Queen. And because of the war, they're thrown together on the boat. It's fairly predictable, and they hate each other, and then they love each other, and it's all that. But there's this scene as they're coming down the Ulanga River in the African Queen. They may be sitting on the boat, they're having tea or something like that. And all of a sudden, Humphrey Bogart will jump up and kick the engine or hit it with a spanner or something, and then come back and sit down because he can hear a sound in the engine that nobody else can hear. Much is made, and sometimes to the extent of self-pity, but much is made about the loneliness of executive leadership. But that is at the root of it, is that nobody else hears the engine quite like you do. There are times when you just feel this thing is going to throw a rod. We're just out of control. I don't know where all the salespeople are. I don't know what's going on. I can't figure out how fast we're growing. We got to pull it in. We got 20 salespeople scattered from Dan to Beersheba. I'm going to cut it back to 10. We may sell less, but I'm going to understand, okay, pull it back in. That's fine. But there are other people that feel like that's a compromise, or that you're retreating, or that you've admitted defeat or something, but you feel this thing is out of control. The chaos is unmanageable, and you've got to pull it back. Who will cherish it is these people. They're going to say, that's right. All that chaos, that was bad stuff. Then you get it all under control. It's so under control, the growth stops. Your sales margins go down. Your profit margin goes down. You suddenly realize, I've got all the valves so tight nobody can move. That's when you have to grab a spanner and open the valves. And now these people are going to say, he didn't learn his lesson. So there are some objective things that will help you too. So part of it is intuitive, part of it is statistical, objective. Here is where growth will happen. Here's where margin increases here. You find energy, creativity, but this can also be where you feel like things are just out of control. Over here on this side is where you really have your finger on everything in the organization. And you say, okay, finally, I know where everybody is. I know where everybody is. But the problem here is that there may be actual statistical things. In a church, has your attendance gone down? The number of baptisms gone down? The percentage of new people in the church? Here is where everything gets under control, but it may be under more control than you want. So in a business, you have to decide how much you can put up with. So you've got a red-hot shot salesman. He's selling 500 units a month. But the people in accounting hate his guts. He won't turn his expense account in on time. He gets addresses wrong. They all say, oh, this guy, we hate this guy. But that's where, for a while, you have to say to them, I hear what you're saying. I'm trying to help him. We're going to help him to grow. But let me just point this out to you. He sells 500 units a month. You don't sell anything. You add stuff. So I need you to put up with it. But then there may come a moment where you realize this guy's no longer worth it to you. I would rather pay for 3 salesmen who will sell 200 units each and turn their expense accounts in. So the problem is that you got all these people on your team, okay? The second problem is this. You are also on the team. You're also on the team, and you have a natural proclivity also. By the way, not every CEO, we might tend to think that CEOs would tend toward the chaos side. That's not necessarily true. What I'm telling you is that everybody in executive leadership has his own true north. You shake the compass all you want to, set it down, and the needle may swing, but sooner or later, it's going to come to your true north. And if that true north is toward control, then the chaos people, you may feel you need them, you want them that they supply, but they will always make you nervous. If you tend toward the chaos side, now listen to Dr. Mark, you are going to have to do 2 things. One is you're going to have to learn some of the skills and abilities of the control side, even though they may not feel natural to you. They may not be things that you just grasp like that. You may have to learn some of these. Secondly, you have to hire people over here that know what they're doing, and you have to listen to them. If you control people are always just a grain of sand in your shoe, then you'll just be irritated with them all the time, and you'll continue to make mistakes that tend toward chaos. So at Southeastern, when we had this explosive growth, building and growing, went from a small college to a substantial liberal arts university with graduate programs and everything, all the new buildings and everything, it wouldn't have been possible if I hadn't had the CFO that I had. People always say, what was the secret of your success at Southeastern? How can I do it? I'd say, hire John Kautz and take the credit. But Mr. Kautz was my vice president of finance and administration, but he had a combination of things. He was a CPA, but he also had a master's degree in marketing, so that he understood the mechanisms of growth. But he was over here. My natural tendency is here. I felt if we could keep things disrupted long enough, growth would somehow magically happen. So I called him in one day and I said, Mr. Counts, I've been looking at the way we do these financial report to the board. What if we took this and moved it over here and did this and rearranged this whole thing? He said, President Rutland, I got to tell you. He said, I have an MBA and a CPA, and I never would have thought of that. I said, great. He said, now, on the other hand, he said, that is a federal felony. I said, I knew that. I was testing you, and yet again, you have passed. Now, you can get all mad and angry when the control people try to rein you in a little bit, or you can ask them, what does it mean? Help me to understand. But sometimes you have to defend the other people on the team from each other. So you have to decide what it's worth to you. You're a pastor. Your youth pastor says, I'm taking 60 teenagers tomorrow to Kings Island Resort or whatever it is. And the church administrator says, no, you're not. You didn't fill out the bus rental in triplicate. There are people who poke their head out of the womb and say, mama or dada. There are other people that poke their head out of the womb and say, expense account, triplicate. And so the youth pastor says, I've got all these kids ready to go. We're leaving in the morning. We're meeting at the church parking lot. And the church administrator says we can't go. I didn't fill out the right forms. Hold tight. You say to the church administrator, look, he's an idiot. He's 24 and he's an idiot. The thing is, he's going to take those kids. I need you to take care of it. Get everything right the best way you can. I'll try to get him to improve on this, but he's going to take those kids. We can't have 60 teenagers in the parking lot and all their parents who have been praying to God that they'll leave for a day. We can't have all them mad at us. So I'm going to ask you to fix it and swallow it. Okay? Now he's mad at you. Then you go to the youth pastor and you say, Daddy loves you. I love you. You're a meaningful, important human being and an addition to my life. But if you do this again, don't worry about the CFO. I'm going to pop a cap in you. Because you have to deal with all those people. But you have to deal with you. You're on this continuum. And you have to be able to listen to both sides. You have to be able to discern what's what. Now, every now and then somebody says to me, wouldn't it have been wonderful to be Jesus? You didn't have to deal with all this stuff. Didn't have to deal with all this management and leadership kind of things. Let's look at two things. One is the feeding of the 5,000. So they come to Jesus and say, we got all these people here, send them away. And he says, you feed them. And they say, Lord, we don't have it. So what's the first thing he asks? Who can tell me? What do you have? Resource management. First of all, quit telling me what we don't have. Tell me what we have. Okay? The second thing is, if you'll remember, tell the people to sit down in groups of 50. Now it's people management. So Jesus is actually managing for the miracle. This feels backwards to Pentecostals and charismatics. What we tend to think is, if God will give me the miracle and everything busts loose, I'll figure out how to run it. But one of the greatest revivals in the history of the world was the Wesleyan Renewal Movement in England, which then became worldwide. Wesley believed that the rails that miracles and revivals run on is management. And so he organized cell groups, small groups, all these kinds of things, everything. That's the reason that they never called themselves Methodists. It was an accusation that was hurled against them. The people called Methodists. They said all they want is a method. They're so into their method, they're just Methodists. Okay? So the method can be the rails that the miracle runs on. So while you're praying for the miracle, how about get the organization ready to be able to sustain the miracle? If not, the miracle can swamp you. Okay? So here's the structure. Now becomes the miracle of multiplication. Now comes the miracle. Let's talk about another one. The woman taken in adultery. You may not think of this as a chaos control issue, but so the Pharisees find this woman. The Bible is very graphic. She's caught in adultery. The King James Bible says in the act. So she is dragged from an adulterous bed into a public street and thrown at Jesus' feet in order, they don't care about her and they don't really care about her sin. They want to trap Jesus because they perceive of him as being a theological chaos person. They see him as being so much about grace that he is all about chaos theologically and legally. Because what is the ultimate mechanism of control? The law. So they say if we can just get him to operate in chaos in the light of the law, we now can crush him with the law. So they dragged this poor woman to the feet of Jesus and say, the law says, the control mechanism says, kill her. And Jesus says, you're right. Kill her. Stone her to death. But he says, if we're going to have the law, we're going to have the law. So whoever has never broken the law, you throw the first stone. There's a fascinating little side note in the King James Bible. It says, beginning with the oldest people, they dropped their rocks and went away. The older you get, the more in touch you are with your own sins. The old dudes say, ooh, I remember when I was 30. And so they leave, okay? And Jesus turns to the woman and he says, where are those that condemn thee? Gone, sir, every one. Neither do I condemn thee. Go thy way and sin no more. Okay, let's be honest. There is a sanctification element in that, right? Sin no more. But we're talking about adultery. That's a pretty frivolous, hey, God doesn't like that. But don't do that anymore. Go home, okay? Then he goes to the temple, and there's the money changers. The worst thing they're doing is jacking up the price on turtle doves, and Jesus wigs out. He freaks out. He's kicking their tables over and hitting them with, says he braids rope into whip. That's gotta hurt. And he's hitting them and calling them snakes, babies, and he's freaking out. Don't you think there might have been somebody on the back of the crowd that said, whatever happened to go thy way and sin no more? Somebody's hitting you in the face with a rope and calling you a snake's baby. I don't think anybody was singing Gentle Jesus, Meek and Mild. What is the thing there? Suppose we had been ministry interns right there or leadership interns and we said, Lord, what? This is a woman who committed adultery and you treat her one way and these people you treat another way. I believe he would have said, look, this poor woman, she's lonely and her husband hadn't been treating her right and she just wanted somebody to say, I love you. She's not evil. She's just sad and lonely. These people, they're merchandising God. This is evil. But nobody could see that quite like the CEO of the universe. He's the one who understands. So For her, they think he's all about chaos. For these people, they say he's all about the law because nobody sees it quite like the leader. So you got this youth pastor who sends a stupid email to some girl in his youth group. And he's, oh my God. So you put him on a year of probation and you try to redeem him and help him and threaten him and counsel him and everything. And you put him back in place a year later. Then 3 years later, a 70-year-old man on your executive team makes a pass at a woman in a prayer meeting. And you tell him, you have to resign from that. You can't be involved in volunteer ministry anymore. I won't have your name on anything. Resign from the board. You can't take part in prayer ministry anymore. And I promise you, somebody's going to say, what about that youth pastor? Come on, what about the youth pastor? And what you got to be able to say is, like Ricky Ricardo, I can't explain this to you. I say, look, this kid, he's 22 and he's stupid. He's not evil, he's stupid. I can help him. This guy's 70. He ought to know better than this. And this was intentional. And I can't redeem this. I can redeem stupid. I can't redeem this. But I promise you, you'll hear me, somebody's going to be mad at you over both things. So, in the chaos control continuum, there are times when you yourself will feel uncomfortable. This thing is just going. And if you're a natural control person, you can say, boy, I feel like this is out of control. How far out of control how long can you tolerate it before you grab a spanner and start tightening the valves? Other times you sense, I've got everything under control, but nothing is happening. How long do you keep it comfortable before you take the valves? So let me give you 2 examples and I'll close. So when I went to Southeastern College, which became Southeastern University while I was there, all the valves were shut. Nothing was happening. Enrollment had collapsed from 1,250, which is still a small school, but all the way to 900, and it was falling fast. The buildings were decorated in early concentration camp. It was awful. And so but the valves were not shut legally. They were rusted shut. Nothing had moved. There was no vision. Without vision, the people perished. There was nothing. There was no energy, no excitement, no movement, no progress. Everything was just rusted shut. So what we had to do was actually introduce chaos. I said, we've got to grow, move, open the valves. So I said to the enrollment management people, I said, we've got to have growth. They said, we're afraid you're going to compromise the standards of admission. I said, here's the standard of admission. Okay, you're in. I said, we'll teach them to read later. Get the little brats in here. Fix the buildings. Borrow some money. We borrowed. I finally convinced the board. The board was an ex officio board. I had 9 Assembly of God district superintendents on my board. The creative energy in that room was a trace element. And I had to convince them of adventuresomeness, movement, growth, progress. We borrowed money and built new dorms. Yes, there was debt on the buildings, but it's self-amortizing debt because we're operating at 98% capacity. So we used one building to leapfrog another building, And then I said to the enrollment management director, fill these buildings up or you and me both are out of work. So I need chaos. I actually hired a vice president of student life. I released the guy that I had, hired a new vice president of student life. And he said, tell me what you want, President Rutland. I said, look at your job title. What I want is life. I want life. When I step out of my office onto the quadrangle, I want to get hit in the head with a Frisbee. I said, nobody's doing anything. I want life. I want some things. I want stuff. He said, we'll have more behavior problems. I said, no, we won't. You will. I said, I'm not the vice president of student life. You are. I said, I want you to make problems for yourself. Cook it up. So in 10 years, we went from 900 to thousands of students, a graduate program, university status. And there we had created a university which had ground shut. I'll never forget the moment in a faculty meeting. It was precious to me. 4 years after I'd been there, one of the faculty members raised his hand and he said, President Rutland, I've got something I want to say. I've taught here for 15 years. And this is the first time I felt like I was a faculty member at a college and not the counselor at a day camp. We actually created the chaos in which that could happen. Now, nearly 11 years later, I'm invited to come to ORU. It's exactly the opposite. ORU is Chaos University. Nobody knows where anything is, like the money or anything. So at ORU, I walked on the campus. I fired the CFO within 10 minutes after I arrived. I said, we've got to know where everything is. So here, I had to tighten the valves. Now, I'd like to tell you all the smart stuff I do. Here's something stupid I did. When I fired the CFO, the sharpest person in that whole realm was the internal auditor. You understand internal auditor? Yes? Good. It's nice to talk to business people, preachers saying no. So the internal auditor is just kind of to keep everybody in your organization from doing bad stuff so that when the external auditor comes, you don't get dinged. Okay? So I talked with her, interviewed her, everything. I thought she understood that I wanted her to move from internal auditor to CFO. The internal auditor keeps everybody from doing bad stuff and catches you when you do. The CFO's job is not that. The CFO's job is resource management and allocation to make your dreams come true. I hired the wrong person. She could not make that jump. All I did was create an internal auditor on speed. So I had the next few years of tension with her over we had to move, but I had to get everything under control at the same time. So opposite needs, opposite requirements at different times in your life. That's going to happen in your organization. When you first start an organization, in a startup, you don't need a policy manual that's 150 pages long. You just say, sell some stuff. Just do something. Make a mistake. I'm okay. But the bigger it gets and the more complicated it gets, you have to start to supply those things that you didn't have back there. What I have to say to you is, this is a prophetic word. When you do that, people that were extremely valuable to you at the initial chaos stage will now say, you've changed. You've changed. And you got to be able to say, yes, I have. I've changed. The organization has changed. The needs have changed. The times have changed. You know what the problem here is? You haven't. Now you got to catch up, or I'll help. There's some organization in an initial phase of chaos that needs you, and I'm going to make you available to them. There'll be other times when you feel that the whole thing is so tight, nothing will move. And you have to be able to lighten up and loosen up. Is this making sense? Well, like Jesus, you have to be able to discern what is the reality of the situation, not the circumstance, not the outward appearance. The outward appearance of this poor woman caught in adultery was that was the greater of the sins. I think you ask anybody, which one is a worse sin, adultery or charging too much for turtle doves? I think they're going to be pretty clear on that. But Jesus sees the reality of the thing. That's the discernment and the intuitiveness of executive leadership. Sometimes it's objective, sometimes it's intuitive. You have to know which one's which, and you have to also challenge your own natural proclivity, your own true north. There are times I tend a little bit toward the chaos side of things. But I learned early on at Mount Perrin, as a matter of fact, with Dr. Walker, I learned that if you're going to move into senior levels of executive leadership, you got to be able to see ad and everything. You got to know where everything is if you're going to move into that level. Mount Perrin changed from high chaos into, or at least to chaos inclination, into being able to understand and appreciate the issues of management and organizational ability. Well, I think I've said more about that than I meant to. So I think you want me to see if there are questions. Is that what you... Okay, you do that then.
Can we give Dr. Rutland a hand, and we'll do some Q&A? Get over here. We're going to do a couple of questions that I'm going to just share for 15 minutes. Who has a question that's burning in them that you'd like to ask Dr. Rutland? John.
Doing your this kind of map for just keep on my first place. You just show really space that energy. How much energy is it to get your activia? I see. Try together have that. Well,
I'm going to say back to you what you asked to make sure I'm understanding the real question. The other part of the staff, not talking about yourself. Right. Okay. Yes, you do want to try to bring them along. You don't want them to leave. All the point I'm making is not that you want to jettison them. The point I'm trying to make is that there will be effort. It's not going to feel good to them. And they can't see what you see. I just need to tell you that. That is the loneliness of executive leadership is you can all sit and look at the same numbers. And you could say, I know I know. That's not. Look at and being around people. Look at the current administration. Can you imagine what it's like to work for Donald Trump? He wakes up every morning with an axe handle beside his bed. He says, who can I irritate today? So imagine, I'm not getting political. I'm talking about leadership. And he's a chaos weapon, right? By the same token, I mean, we're all grown-ups here. By the same token, can you imagine working for Joe Biden? You just have to say to yourself, there's no chaos here. You know? So that's the challenge of the staff of both sides of this. And so, yes, to your question, you have to work with them. You want to try to bring as many of them as possible. Give the most information that you can give. Give the rationale. I'm just saying you have to know in your mind it's going to be hard for them. And for some of them, it may even be impossible. They may just say, I can't go there. Did I come close? That's right. That's right, exactly. And in your field, particularly, I can imagine, that they are really control freaks. And the people who have achieved in your field are people that were really kind of chaos freaks. And they were able to bring that creative energy, that chaotic thinking into a field that's all about hyper control. I can see that in your field. Yeah.
Two more.
But yeah, I know that Yeah. Pastor here talks a lot about we don't just want to win at business, we want to win at home. And your message to me had such parallels to leading a family. And I learn I am control. My Latin wife, maybe not so much. So I just think a lot of messages for family leadership and decision making, and when to loosen the valves there too. Thank you.
Yeah, that's the thing about marriage, particularly. Let's reduce it from family to marriage. So this old saying really is, to a great extent, actually true, that opposites attract. Because there is something inside of us that says, this person's going to supply what I'm lacking. We may not think of it, but this person's going to supply what I'm lacking. So my wife and I are quite, my default position has been the accelerator.
Yeah.
Her default position is the brake. And so you can imagine early on in marriage that we just could spin a car around. And so what we learned and are learning, even after 58 years of marriage.
Come on.
We are learning. I know your applause are for her after you've been with me. We learned that you each have a set of gears, and if those teeth clash, then it just causes pain and noise and everything. But if you can both put the clutch in and let the gears mesh, you can create mechanical advantage. If that other person's control, that other person's chaos can lend a richness. I said to my wife one day, I said, baby, it's really lucky for you that you married me. I said, if it hadn't been for me, you would have turned into a quilt. And she said, it's so true, Mark. It's so true. She said, you've brought adventure to my life. She said, on the other hand, thank God you married me. You would have driven your truck over a cliff years ago. So, and that is both the tension and the delight of marrying somebody that is not only anatomically different than you are, that used to not have to be said, and who is emotionally and psychologically different than you are. Sorry. I'm having fun with this. I'm sorry.
We love it. Come on.
This is great to get to this age. I ain't running for nothing. Say whatever I want to, and the pastor's out of the room. So this is great. Is that it?
You got one more? Anyone? Ryan, you always have great questions. Come on.
Yeah, can't do that.
Hey, he has to make one up.
Austin. Oh, right here. Thank you, Agnes.
You're speaking of the dichotomy of control versus chaos. Is there another one that comes to mind in leadership where it's not all the way this or all the way that, it's somewhere in the middle that would come to your mind next?
Yes. In fact, when I teach this, the next thing I would teach is the vision function vertical axis. So there's stuff that you have to do, functions. They have to be done. But at the other end, there has to be vision. Without a vision, the people perish. Without functions, the vision perishes. So, yes, if you want to teach this, son, come up here. I'm trying to. Yeah, no, that's a very good question, and that is the next tension. There are times when you have to have high vision. There are other times when the vision can outrun the functionality. Good.
All right, one last one. Brian in the back. Hey, if anybody needs an unbelievable interior designer, Brian is your man. He did stuff in his condo, and every time I show up, I'm like, man, I love Brian.
Oh, that's good. Thank you. A quick question. So in an organization, when you have, it could be in a church, this is probably more what I'm thinking about, but if you've tightened down the valves and you have potentially lost momentum because of that or other contributing factors, how can you go back, or what's the best way to reignite momentum once you've lost it?
That's a very, very good question. So one way is, so let's say that one of the things that will destabilize. So sociologically, they talk about a community that's destabilized. It means that sociologists will tell you it means it's growing by more than 5% year after year after year after year. It's destabilized in every way, the infrastructure, everything. So growth is a destabilizing factor. So sometimes, okay, what I'm going to say now is a little bit dangerous, but because I don't know what your system is here. Sometimes the route of access into a church can become so strenuous and demarked that it slows it down. You have to go through 16 weeks of membership training. You have to, give us the footprint of your firstborn male child, and all these things that can make the route into the church slow and tedious. Well, that means that I don't have to have more cell groups this year than I had last year. So the control people will like that. But if you loosen up, let's just get, it's what I always said about things like the men's softball team at a church. I never understood why do they have to be saved and sanctified and speak in tongues and everything to play on the softball team? Just get a heathen that can turn a double play and win him to Christ. All right? So that's a difference of philosophy. So when you speed it up, whatever mechanism will speed it up, will create some level of disturbance. Is that making sense? So whatever speed and growth are things that destabilize and cause lack of dependent. If we have 35 cell groups this year and we want 35 next year, then the thing we need to do is keep all these centers out. And that actually becomes a control mechanism. I don't know if I came close to your question or not. My goal in lecturing is always to confuse an audience where they don't know what to ask. Austin.
Specific question I hope that helps others. I'm a new middle manager in a company, and my experience in leadership intuition is saying we need more control. What our CEO is speaking is that we need more chaos. How would I
let's
handle this?
change the words just a minute. So do you think he's saying more chaos, or is he saying we want more growth? He may not know which one it is. I'm asking you to read his mind. Do you think it is that he wants your mill to sell more, mill more, do more? Is he wanting speed? What is it that he wants out of that chaos?
Speed and execution, better execution.
Okay.
Before we grow more.
When you say that, Austin, actually, that sounds like control. It sounds to me like he's wanting tighter controls that can manage speed and growth when it comes. Is that what he's saying or not? I'm not sure I'm understanding. It's probably me. I didn't have but one cup of coffee this morning.
That's what he's saying he wants, but the approach that he's preaching to us sounds like chaos. I want it to just happen.
It's probably because he himself, that's what I was saying about the executive, he himself probably feels comfortable with chaos. So
I would agree with that.
Okay, so what I would suggest to you then is, in a practical way, figure out the outcome that he wants. Figure out the outcome he wants. Does he wants more rails run better so that when the trains start to move, we're ready for it?
Yes.
Okay, then set about to do that and do it faster, quicker, more efficiently, get more rails laid and get ready faster. He doesn't really want the chaos. What he wants is for you to prepare the rails for the chaos when it comes and for you to do it quickly so that he doesn't have to deal with the details. Is that about right?
I would agree.
All right, last one to Blake. Austin, would you walk that over? Is that all right? Blake, either you actually have a question or your wife texts me and set you up to lose. So let's see what happened to you.
She texted you. So we're resonating with everything because we're a two-person operation. I'm definitely the control. She's definitely the chaos. And every day with my own mind, I'm trying to think, how can I take her chaos? Because it's obvious that the chaos is what is going to grow. And she's the front end of the process anyways. So she's in charge of the growth anyways. So I always feel like if I don't find some way to not harness is the wrong word, some way to structure what she's trying to do in a controlled fashion, it won't grow to where it could. So I'm kind of trying to control the chaos, not to limit it, but to optimize it.
Yes.
What are some processes or methods that you'd suggest for that?
Yes, actually, what was your name again?
Blake.
Yeah, actually, Blake, you're kind of asking the same question Austin is.
Okay.
So, so does your wife? You're talking about two people. That's your wife?
Yes.
So you're actually sleeping with the chaos person. That's a little different than Austin's situation.
That's true.
So what you are saying. So I used to manage a baseball team, and so every now and again, some player would say, "How do I get my batting average up?" I would say, "Well, get more hits." Would seem like a good way. So in a way, you're answering your own question. What your job is to accept the fact that the chaos that she brings is valuable and the future of the company. And that your job is to get the rails laid so that when the chaos comes, you're ready for it. You're actually answering your own question, in my view.
Okay.
Anything else?
I mean, I was just hoping that there was some kind of like methodology to it or something like, well, like like there's in the bigger companies, there's like Six Sigma that do stuff like that where they'll come in and they'll get the chaotic people to have a process layout, things like that. And I've tried that, but our son is in the business too, and he also is just like her.
Is he a chaos person?
Yes.
Well, thank God you're there, right?
Yeah, well, I think so, but every time I try to implement things, it just doesn't happen.
Well, then
So I think that's on me more than her.
the issue may be communication, that you
Okay.
have to say to the chaos side of things, I want what you bring. I want the chaos. I want the growth. I want the energy. What I don't want is to drive the thing over the cliff.
Mhm.
Let me get it ready for what you provide. What you provide, I can't make this company grow. You make it grow.
Right.
What I can do is get it ready for the growth. So if you will listen to me and let me have these mechanisms, policies, procedures, SOPs, let me get all this in a row, get it ready.
Mhm.
Then when you supply all this destabilization, I'll be ready for it. So the issue may be just communicating.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
Is it?
Yes, it is.
Señor Dios le bendiga.
All right, let's give Dr. Rutland a hand. Thank you, Dr. Rutland. The last thing you ever want is to share something after Dr. Mark Rutland, so I'll try to be thoughtful. It's kind of interesting. So, in between each mastermind, one of the things each leadership group that Pastor John and I were talking about is what are some things that we can share that we've learned in between leadership groups? Because as you continue to build, we're continuing to learn and grow with you. And kind of an interesting thing. So long story short, a lot of you know I'm a retirement planner, and I've got a couple that had been with me for a long time. And actually he's not a senior pastor, has been a senior pastor, but is a pastor. And he and his wife were married for, 50 plus years. And he's a really good looking, in shape guy that's probably got 25 years left. And I've always thought, man, he's going to find a wife really quickly. And he recently made a post that, he loved his wife and she was his first and will be his last. And I was like, man, you shouldn't quit yet. I'm like, you're so in shape, so good looking. Well, here's what's interesting. And here's why I'm going this direction is like a gal on my team. She goes, hey, she said, Trey, she said, did you know that somehow we got talking about social media? She said, within Instagram, you can see what your friends like. And I said, no, I didn't know that. She goes, in fact, in my feed all the time, I see the things that you're liking. And I'm like, oh, thank God I like good things. And And I didn't know that she could see the things that I like. And so she showed me this feature, and the next day I'm going through looking at the things that my friends have liked. And I saw that this client and friend and pastor of mine who had lost his wife had liked this girl in a very skimpy bikini. And I was like, that must be like his granddaughter or something. And then I saw another woman that he liked and another woman that he liked. And I thought, isn't it interesting that he doesn't know that people are seeing what he's liking? And what I thought is if I and his friends can see his Instagram, think about all the things that God sees inside of us. And it gave me a moment where I thought, Lord, if there's anything in my life that's causing me to stop you from increasing or blessing me or making me a better husband or parent, please show me those things. So I want to encourage you, Pastor Jonathan and I, we have a heart to help you grow, help you develop, help you become. And one of the biggest things that I was taught growing up is if it feels like the blessing is delayed, it's never on God, it's on us. The biggest thing I was taught to ask is Lord, or to look in the mirror and say, what am I not doing that I need to be doing to get into a position for God to bless me more? And so I want to encourage you as you're thinking about, Lord, I want you to increase me in my marriage. I want you to increase me as a parent. I want you to increase my opportunities. God, is there anything in my life that I need to remove so that you can open up the windows of heaven over me? So that's just, the last couple weeks is just something I've been thinking about and I want to share with you. Couple things. This morning I want to share from Ephesians 6:8, which says, what you make happen for others, God will make happen for you. Some of you have heard me share this before, but coming out of college, one of the things that I feel like the Lord's given me an ability to do is to help align people with the right relationships. I've even got a few friends that I've aligned with the right spouse, the right career, because one of the things I'm passionate about is seeing people win. Anybody loves seeing others win? In fact, there's been friends of mine on Facebook that I didn't even know who they were, but they were celebrating something, and I celebrated with them, and I was like, I wonder who that person is. But I'm so excited. They got a new car, they got engaged, they had a baby. And I want to encourage you, a lot of you already are, but be the type of people that celebrate other people's wins. Most people have more people to share their challenges with than they do to share their successes with. Who do you call when something good happens in your life? Early in my career, I had several situations that I felt like the Lord had used me to bless others, to increase others. And one of these I've shared before, so I'll hit on it. But one of the challenges, I think, of being a generous person is choosing to stay generous when you find out that most people in the world are not generous people. And one of my biggest life lessons has been, I'm not generous because of what others will do for me. I'm generous because of who's God created me to be. And I've had to decide that I'm going to continue to sow great seeds and that it's going to be God that opens doors and not man. I've shared the example of earlier in my career when I was a sophomore in college, I had a job at a car dealership at Walser Mazda in Burnsville. And man, one of the things I learned, Dr. Rutland, is car dealerships oftentimes are the career of lost dreams. There's a lot of great people. There are people I know that have set out to do car sales and they love it. But a lot of them, as I learned and talked with them and learned their stories, a lot of them took that job for a year until, and now it had been 15 years, 20 years, 25 years, 30 years. So one of the things I'd encourage you is if you're in a season that you feel stuck, make sure that when you show up to this room that you're asking God, Lord, show me what my next is so I can be where you want me to be. Dr. Rutland and I were talking in the vehicle last night, and one of the things I've found, and you've probably experienced this, is one of the worst feelings in the whole world is being in the wrong place or not feeling like you're where God has you. And one of the greatest feelings in the whole world is being in a place that you know God has you to be. So I want to encourage you, if you're not in alignment in your career or in the right company, don't quit searching, keep knocking on doors. One of the gentlemen that quickly became one of my friends, every organization I've ever walked into, I've always looked to see, as Dr. Rutland says, who's running this place. And I always wanted to know who's the leader. And when I walked into Walser Mazda, I said, who are the top 2 salespeople? And they introduced me on my first day to the 2 top salespeople. And I thought, hey, if I can learn a little bit from them in my 12 weeks of this car sales internship, my goal is to get to the top, sell 4 cars in a day. That's kind of like a thing in the car industry. And there's a guy's name, we'll just call him Mike because that's his name. I won't share his last name, but every chance I had, I found out that he was selling not 10 cars like the average person. He was selling 20, 25, 30 cars a month. So every chance I had when it was sold, I'd say, hey, Mike, can we walk the parking lot together? And can you tell me what you're doing that you're selling 2 to 2.5 times more cars than everybody else in there? And as we learned, or as we walked, I would learn what he was doing, and I tried to implement something every day to get better. And as we started talking, I found out that he had graduated from school in Wisconsin, and he had started selling cars just while his wife finished up school. And he took it for 6 months, and here he was 2.5 years later, stuck selling cars, not knowing what was next. And I said, Mike, I said, can I just say something to you? I said, you are so sharp. In fact, you're too sharp to be stuck selling cars because I see the gifts that you have. And he said, well, that sounds great, but how do I figure out my next? And I said, hey, I know some people in financial services, and I think you'd be great at what they do. Let me introduce you. And I introduced my buddy Mike to another friend of mine, and he ended up leaving car sales to go into financial services. And as smart as he was, when he got into a financial advisor role, he struggled for 1.5 years and he couldn't get it. Well, the partners at that company called me and they said, man, we love your friend Mike. We think he's so sharp, but we either need to let him go or we need to move him to operations. And they said, but at the salary that we would give him, they said, we could go hire somebody with experience running a company that's much bigger than where we're at. And I said, well, let me ask you something. I said, has he been a loyal friend to you guys? And they said, yeah, he's been loyal. I said, is he gifted in the areas that he needs gifted? And they said, yeah, he's gifted. I said, if I were you, I would move him to operations and give him 6 months and be loyal to people that you already trust and have been loyal to you. They ended up moving him into operations. And over the next 6 years, they went from $0 under management to $600 million under management. And what ended up happening that's so interesting is when I sold a company 2 years after college, or 3.5 years, trying to figure out my next, I went to them and I said, hey, I don't know what I want to do, but I'd like to try retirement planning. And they ended up hiring me, and I got a career there. And, almost weekly, he'd say, hey, Trey, thank you for giving me an opportunity to go from car sales to director of operations over a firm managing $600 million. Well, 1.5 years in, I ended up failing an exam that they wanted me to have. And the day I went in the next day to talk about this exam that I failed, and I was a lot better at sales than academics. Anybody else? I'm admitting that in front of the president of my university, so that's awesome. And I went in, and to be honest, you know what I thought? I thought, even though they've told me that if I don't have this, they don't want me this position, because I'm the top salesperson, I'm sure they'll make an exception. And he walked in and he said, hey, Trey, I just want you to know, he said, I think you not passing this exam is probably the Lord telling you that you're not fit for financial services and you should just go pastor somewhere. And I thought, first of all, just go pastor. It's probably the hardest career there is. But then I thought, isn't it interesting that the person that I set up to win is the person that's letting me go? And over my career, one of the things I found is at the beginning of my career, I thought that if I set people up and I sowed seeds into their life, the harvest would come from them. And over the next 6 years, I had another gentleman. I walked into his business, and he was a financial advisor, actually related to me. And I had reached out to the investor that made it possible for him to build his business. And I had connected the investor, and I had brought a director of operations and the office manager. And I had set this gentleman up to succeed in his business. And 2 years later, I said, hey, I'm going to be leaving the firm that I'm at. Just got let go. I said, what would you think about making room for me to come build with you? And he said, Trey, he goes, I don't think that's a very good idea. He goes, we don't really have room for you here. And I said, hey, no problem. I'm going to go talk to the investor and see what he thinks, and we'll chat. Well, I went and spoke with the investor, who was a good family friend, and he said, Trey, he said, this person is basically running the business into the ground. He said, we're $300,000 in the hole. He goes, I'm thinking about closing it down. And he said, if you would come in, he goes, I trust you. He goes, if you'd give it 2 years, I'd like to see you help me turn this thing around. And so even though this other advisor, who's an uncle of mine, didn't want me to come in, It was kind of forced upon him. And 2.5 years later, not only were we not in the hole, but we had $250,000 in the bank. Help bring the budget under control, help bring in more revenue, kind of move some of the leadership. And the investor had told me, if you can turn this around, I'm going to make you a partner here. And so we had some things going on. And 2.5 years later, we're sitting in a conference room with the advisor, an uncle of mine, by the way, sitting with the investor and sitting with the investor's attorney who was on his staff, just going over finances and operations. And I thought, this is going to be a great meeting. Here I've turned the business around in 2.5 years, and this is the meeting I'm going to get some equity in the company. And we're sitting there, and this other advisor who's related to me, over the whole 2.5 years, just despised the fact that I was there. And the investor's attorney looked at him and he said, "Hey, can I ask you a question?" We'll just call him Joe, which is not his name. And he said, "Can I call something out?" And, what are you going to say? So this uncle of mine, who's about 50 years old, said, "Yeah, you can call something out." And she said, "You absolutely despise Trey." And he goes, "Yeah, I do." And she said, "Can you tell us why you despise Trey?" And he didn't say anything. And she goes, "Can I tell you why you despise Trey?" And I was like, man, this is a good meeting. And she said, "You despise Trey because you wanted to be the hero and turn this thing around, but you're the one that buried it and he's the one that came in and rescued it." And my uncle said, "That's the reason I despise Trey." And so the reason I share that is I ended up walking away from that because even though I had earned the equity, the lesson was I would rather work in a place of peace than make more money in a place of chaos. And so one of the things that Keith Craft talks about, and it's really helped me, is in order for you and I to win in life, the people around us have to want to see us win. So if you're in a season that you're not winning, one of the questions I want you to ask yourself is, are the people around me people that want to see me win? One of the things I've learned is there have been people in my life that I thought they were my greatest friends because one of the challenges of being an optimist is you only see the best of everything sometimes. Anybody ever found that to be true? And one of the things I learned is I asked my wife, "Who would you say my friends are?" And she pointed out who my real friends were from the people who I thought were my friends. So my question is to pause is, are the people that are around you people that want to see you win? This room is special because you're in a room of people that want to see you win. I ended up leaving that company, and what's so interesting is when I had started at that company, I brought in a relationship, and that relationship I had brought in was a partner that helped us manage assets and investments. And over the last 8 years between my business and the business of my uncles that I brought to him, he has passive income of an extra $1.75 million a year. Anybody think that's a good friend? And the reason I share that is to thank me for bringing that business. Every year he sends me a fruit basket as a thank you for the $1.75 million of passive income a year. And the reason I'm saying that is not to say that I'm hurt or I'm offended. I'm saying that to say is one of the lessons that God has taught me is that your and my harvest is likely and almost always not going to come from the place that we sow our seeds. But don't let how people respond to your generosity change you from being a generous person. One of the things I'm thankful for is that God always restores things. God always brings harvest. A year ago, one of the insurance companies that I work with, they said, "Hey, Trey, based on your numbers, it looks like that you're going to win a trip to Madrid, Spain, to a 5-star hotel." And I was like, "Thank you, Jesus." And they said, "We just want you to know that you're on track for that." So I told Steph last year, I said, "Hey, we've got this big anniversary coming up." And I said, "Let's not plan a trip because it looks like we're going to be given a trip." And 3 months before the trip, I called and I was like, "Hey, I haven't gotten the call about being in the top 200 advisors in the country for that trip." I said, "No pressure, but I was just curious if that happened and if you've announced it." And he said, "Actually, we've announced it." And he said, at the end of the year, we had about 37 advisors that submitted so much business, it knocked you out of the 200. And so he said, "So you actually didn't win the trip." And I was like, "Okay, no problem." And I got off the phone and I told Steph, I said, not trying to be over spiritual, but I felt like we're supposed to be on that trip. So 2 weeks goes by and I get an email, and the email says, hey, congratulations, you've won this trip to Madrid, Spain, to the, was it the Four Seasons Hotel in Madrid, the Ritz-Carlton in Madrid. And I was like, oh, great. Now they sent me the invitation by accident. So I called the vice president of this large insurance company. And I said, hey, I just want to let you know that I got the invite, even though I didn't qualify. And he said, well, Trey, I was just about to call you. He said, you didn't qualify, and there were 37 people ahead of you that qualify for this trip. And he said, but we had 3 people in the 200 that can't make it. And before I called the next 3 of those 37, I looked at the other vice president and said, hey, we're the vice presidents. Who do we want on this trip? So he said, so even though you didn't make it, we want you to come on the trip. Just don't tell the other 37. And I called Steph and I said, how cool is it that even though we didn't qualify, God qualified us? So I just want to leave you with is continue to be a generous person. Keep sowing seeds, because one of the things I've found is that if I stay generous, God will stay generous with me. Don't keep track in the seeds that you sow, because God will always restore it with more. Don't stop sowing. Don't stop being generous, because God is a generous God. Thank you for everybody for being a part of today. Please make October a priority. Jared Neiman is one of Jonathan and I's best friends, and he's going to knock it out of the park. And then in November, we have Keith Kraft, who's going to knock it out of the park. And we're just so excited that you're in the room and for all the things that are happening. Please make it a great day.